If you live in the UK, you're almost certainly aware of Sainsbury's supermarket, and you're also probably aware of the lack of barbecue type cuts available in supermarkets. So things like your typical briskets, packer briskets, large beef short ribs, you really have to go to your local butcher or a specialist butcher to get hold of them. However, Sainsbury's are now doing some huge beef dino ribs. They also do a brisket. I cooked that on the channel last year, and I'm really impressed with the size of these short ribs. These are like Texas sized, the kind that you may have seen me cook, or the ones that you see on Instagram, or the big barbecue joints sell them, Terry Black's, Franklin, Louis Miller, that kind of thing. I bought them this week, obviously, but I also bought them last year, and all I've done is just look through the shelf and tried to find the ones with the best amount of marbling. So we're gonna smoke them up Texas style. And we're not gonna do too much to these. As usual, beef ribs normally come with a nice thick layer of fat and then silver skin underneath, which I like to remove. Nice amount of marbling in there. I've cooked these a few times, they come out really nice. I'm gonna take some of this fat cap down. But that silver skin just causes a problem. It doesn't break down like fat, it doesn't render. I find that it just becomes chewy, and all the seasoning that you put on top of it, you don't end up eating anyway. So the downside of getting rid of it is that you end up taking all this really nice fat off the top. A few little bits left on there, it's not gonna be a problem. And then in terms of seasoning, we're gonna keep it very simple. Classic Texas style, 2 parts pepper to 1 part salt. And we're simply gonna dump our ribs in. Obviously you can use the shaker method, but I find that this kind of dump into the seasoning method, you kind of get a perfect amount of pepper and salt on there. It's not going to be too salty, it's not going to be too peppery, it's going to be perfectly seasoned, works every time. And there we have our beef ribs nicely seasoned up. We'll take them outside, get them on the pit. So we are going to be cooking these beef ribs on the Traeger, and honestly I think if you use a smoke tube, the smoke flavour isn't that bad. Put the meat up top, and then we're going to cook these at about 165 Fahrenheit for the first maybe hour, maybe 2 hours. Really help to build in that smoke flavour, help to build that bark up, and then once we've cooked for 2 hours-ish, we'll knock this up to about 250 Fahrenheit and actually start cooking these ribs. Cook them until it's time to turn the temperature up. These beef ribs have been on for about an hour and a half at 165 Fahrenheit, and already, because of that smoke tube, starting to get a nice colour forming, nice bark starting to set in. So we're going to bump this up to 250 Fahrenheit and just keep cooking. These have been on for a total of 4 hours now, so we're going to bump this up to 275 and cook them until they're tender. Simple as that. 8 hours on the dot. These are feeling nice and tender. So we're going to put these into this drippings tray, which is basically just pure melted fat, and let them rest for an hour or so. I mean, if you're going to make meat wait for you to eat it, you may as well let it wait in some fat. It's going to give it a nice glossiness and apparent juiciness. So these will hang out when they get to around 145 internal temperature, we can get into them. So these beef ribs have been resting for about 45 minutes and they are looking good. Nice and dark. They've been resting in that rendered beef fat. That beef fat that just naturally came out of them whilst they were cooking, and I'm really happy with how they've come out. So you can probably see they are nice and dark, nice and barky, nice and shiny from sitting in that beef fat as well. And that pellet grill doesn't do too bad. Yeah, it's looking really nice. So I'm gonna plate these beef ribs up. Woo. And for me, the perfect pairing for some beef rib is just some white onion and just some pickles. Gonna go with some Leroy and Lewis mustard sauce and a little stack of buttercrust white bread. And yes, I did bring this home in my suitcase. So they look really good. They smell really good. That is outrageously rich and super moist. Wow. For UK grass-fed supermarket beef, that's great. Come around and show you. Super tender, incredibly fatty. You can just pull that meat out. And the good thing about these individual bones, obviously you get the bark all the way around them, which is quite nice. I'm gonna make up my favorite way to eat beef rib. That is in a little foldy. Hopefully you can see just how fatty and glistening that is. I'm gonna go on with some white onion, a couple of pickles, and some of that Leroy and Lewis mustard barbecue sauce. And that, for me, is the best way to eat beef rib. And part of the reason I'm doing this and using the butter crust is because I'm annoyed that I didn't get the beef rib from Louis Miller when I was in Texas a couple of weeks ago. So here it is. That's what I needed. Gonna have to go for another dip. And that 2 parts pepper to 1 part salt never fails. It's got a really good amount of pepper, really helped the bark. Obviously, it's well seasoned. It doesn't take a lot of effort. You know, you don't have to eyeball it with a shaker or anything like that. And I know that this video wasn't particularly detailed in terms of the cook, but I've got quite a few videos on how to cook beef ribs and they're pretty much the same. It really is a case of just getting some good color and smoke on them nice and early, whether that be running a slightly dirtier fire in an offset, or in our case today, a smoke tube on the Traeger, cooking nice and low for an hour or so. And then it's just a case of bumping up the temperatures to around 250, 275, something like that. Render the fat, get it tender. You don't even need to wrap them. Even when you're dealing with grass-fed supermarket beef in the UK, it really couldn't be any more simple than that. The whole purpose of this video really was to show you, if you hadn't already seen it, these supermarket beef ribs, and hopefully I've done that. Again, I'm really impressed with the amount of fat, but I'm mostly impressed with the fact that you can just go into the local supermarket in the UK now and buy a Texas-sized beef rib. I mean, you couldn't do that a couple of years ago. So that's, for me, someone who's really passionate about barbecue, particularly Texas style barbecue. I'm really happy about it. And I would highly recommend, if you don't have a local butcher who does beef ribs and you're paying over the odds online to get beef ribs, then go check out your local Sainsbury's, see if they offer these. They're a good price. They are very good, easy to cook, and clearly delicious, because I can't get through many sentences without taking another bite. I would highly recommend them. So that's pretty much it for this video. I know it wasn't a long one, but hopefully it gave you an idea as to whether these beef ribs were worth it and inspired you to go out and pick some up. Definitely worth doing. Thank you very much for watching. Like, comment, subscribe, do all those things. It really helps me out. And I'll see you again in a couple of weeks for another video.